attention, please. Thank you for coming tonight. I am Lieutenant Commander Richard Walsh. I teach in the physics section. Some of you may know. Starting this over, tonight's lecture will not be on physics, but instead on aviation. It is my distinct honor and pleasure to introduce you all to Lieutenant Commander Brian McLaughlin, a fellow member of the great class of 1999.
Woo! Yeah!
Lieutenant Commander McLaughlin graduated in the top 100% of his class here at the Coast Guard. Following graduation, he proceeded to the Coast Guard Cutter Tahoma out of New Bedford, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Decided two spatial dimensions weren't exciting enough, proceeded to flight school, Naval Air Station, Pensacola, Florida, and then Naval Air Station, Corpus Christi, Texas. Following that, he learned how to fly the mighty H-60 Jayhawk, and then proceeded to Air Station Clearwater, Florida, where we flew together, search and rescue, and law enforcement. Following Air Station Clearwater, Lieutenant Commander McLaughlin proceeded to Kodiak, Alaska, which I'll tell you a little bit about tonight, and is now currently stationed at the Aviation Training Center, Mobile, Alabama, where he's training new H-60 pilots. Please give a warm welcome to Lieutenant Commander McLaughlin.
Can you hear me all right? Is this working? All right. Good evening. Thanks, Rich, for that. And good to be back. It's been about 10 years. Good to see you all. Not much has changed. We didn't have OUs, but good to see you all. Thanks for having me. My name is Lieutenant Commander Brian McLaughlin. I'm here to talk to you a little bit tonight about the Alaska Ranger case that happened in 2008. We'll go over a little bit about the history of the ship, a little bit about what it did. Also discuss with you the crews that were involved, the air crews and the cutter force that was involved, and we'll go over some CRM. Anyone familiar with that term, CRM, crew resource management? You'll pick up a little bit more of that when you get out with the fleet. But that's going to go over working together as a crew. Basically, the concept is whether you're an E4 or an 06 in the plane, if I put the plane in the water, you're going to die right after me. So you have an equal voice to speak up at any point to make sure we don't do that. So that's a big part of aviation right now, the CRM. And we'll discuss that. Also, I'm going to discuss 3 lessons of A that I learned on this case, which are assault, abandonment, and accountability. Sounds bad, but I'll explain it more later. So real quick, the crews involved, I don't know if anyone will know these guys. We had the Coast Guard 1705, the C-130 that was on scene with us that night. Coast Guard Cutterman Row, 378. I couldn't fit all the names in there, so we'll go with the cutter. And the 6566, which is 65 stationed out of Kodiak, actually 4 deployed on the back of the Monroe at that time, and then my crew on the Coast Guard 6007. Start out, we'll go with a quick layout of Alaska. Western coast of the United States, Canada, Alaska. Zooming in a little bit, Kodiak Island, the city of Kodiak. This is the Alaska Peninsula, and the Aleutian Chain, which extends about 1,200 miles west of the mainland of Alaska. Kodiak, the cutters and the air station are all based out of Kodiak, and that's basically, that pin represents, is actually bigger than the actual populated portion of the island. So most of that island is just wild. Next point of interest is Dutch Harbor. Anyone heard of Dutch Harbor? Deadliest catch, right? So Dutch Harbor is important. That's where the fishing fleet moors up. They kind of do their maintenance. They go out from there, get their catch, and bring it into the process from that point. That's about 700 miles from Kodiak straight line, which is into drive from here to Charleston, South Carolina, just to give you an idea of scope. The Alaska Ranger was also moored out of there on March 22nd, the Saturday before the incident. Next point of interest is St. Paul Island up there, and this is roughly the middle of nowhere, Bering Sea. Northern part of the 2 Pribilof Islands, that becomes important. There's a Loran Sea Station up there, which is actually going to be gone completely here pretty soon. We forward deploy an H-60 and 2 helicopter crews up there after the new year every year case some kind of mishap should occur. Not that it ever would, but just in case, right? And that's, to give you an idea, a straight line, that's about 850 miles, which is like here to Savannah, Georgia. So obviously that's a long response time. Plus we can't go to right, we have to go to Cold Bay here, stop, fuel, and then go back out there. So we're deployed there for 3 months at a time. Two weeks each crew, but total period of 3 months to be closer. Actually, that afternoon, Saturday the 22nd. Yes, sir. On this. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
All right. It's like a little spy microphone. Okay. So the afternoon of March 22nd, my crew was off going at 1700, so we're off duty. We do our thing. The other crew at about 5:02 got launched on the SAR case and medevac to go down to Dutch Harbor and pick up a heart attack patient. In response to that, the C-130, the 1705, launched from Kodiak to Anchorage, Alaska. It was really windy in Kodiak that day. We have limited runway configuration, and plus the Brownie maker on the C-130s doesn't work well in the wind, so they had to get out of there. And pre-staged in Anchorage just in case they were needed to assist with that medevac. So they were up there. Also up there that night, Coast Guard Cutter Monroe, 378-foot white needle of death, up there steaming just below the Arctic ice edge. And what you'll see in the winter is the Arctic ice will come from the North Pole all the way down. And that winter it was about 90 miles south of St. Paul. And just to give you an idea. I actually took this picture, not while I was flying, right? You can't do that. But that week, so this is all ocean. The dark spots are just the parts that are still wet in liquid form. So that's all around St. Paul that winter. So that night, the Monroe was steaming just along the ice edge to maintain a lead for the night. It was a little bit calmer at the end of the ice, a little sea down. All right, so there's the general layout. The Alaska Ranger, 200-ish foot factory trawler. This was built about 38 years ago as a platform tender in the Gulf of Mexico. Go out and bring supplies and whatnot to the oil rigs. Sometime between then and now, it was converted to the factory trawler you see here, which means they got a gigantic fish deck on the back, drop off huge trawl nets to bottom trawl, haul it back on, hit the fish, gut the fish, box them, freeze them, so by the time they get back into port, they just ship it out all over the United States. So it's all in one factory processor. The afternoon of March 22nd, Saturday, Alaska Ranger got underway, headed north into the Bering Sea to begin their fishing week. I think they were scheduled for about a 3-week trip. Meanwhile, that afternoon, as I said, my crew was off going duty, so we were busy playing Call of Duty 4, keeping our skills sharp, right? What Call of Duty are they on now? No, but this is old news now. And the crew of the Cutter Monroe and the 6566 were actually busy recovering from a big bean eating contest. And that's actually the truth, and this will come back into the story later on. Meanwhile, the C-130 is up in Anchorage at Taco Bell and watching movies and stuff. Enjoying themselves. General layout for the morning. At just after midnight on March 23rd, Easter Sunday, the Alaska Ranger dropped its rudder post, which leaves a big hole in the back of the ship, which is bad, right? So, start taking on water. By the time the assistant engineer gets on scene in the aft rudder room, sees what's going on, the flooding's progressed too far. They actually had one of their watertight doors, bungee corded open, I believe, and it allowed the flooding to progress too quickly. So, they tried to get under containment, realized they weren't going to be able to. So at 02:45 that morning, the first call came in.
I can't hear it.
Yeah, he's turning it up. Over for everyone. By the way, he graduated number 1 in our class.
to the United States Coast Guard for that offshore communication station. Over.
Okay, so that was the actual Mayday call that came in, and it would go on for several more minutes getting details from the ship, and you can see there is the Alaska Ranger's last known position. That's the position they just reported on the radio. As I mentioned before, my crew was off for the night. They and the other crew was flying a SAR case down to Dutch Harbor. They recovered back to St. Paul around 1 a.m. with about 4.5 hours on, which as air crews, or at least rotary wing air crews, once we get to 6 hours, we're cooked for the night. So they were pretty close. So as a result, District 17, the Alaska Command, and our operations officer elected to send my crew since we had theoretically no flight time on us. Now, I had gone to bed right after 1. I waited for the other crew to come in just to make sure they did get in and see how the case went. And so I went to bed about 1. It's now 3 o'clock, the call comes in. Fortunately, my co-pilot, Steve Bond, was still awake playing Call of Duty 4, so he was there to take the call. The report that came in from our ODO was a 189-foot factory trawler with 47 people on board. It was 200 miles south of St. Paul, taking on water. The reports were kind of varied, whether the flooding was under control, or people had abandoned ship, or begun abandoning ship, so we weren't really sure what the severity was, but we knew that they were in distress. They also passed that the Cutter Monroe was en route, but they couldn't launch the 65 because the sea state was such that they would be out of pitch and roll limitations. And for the first who've been on any kind of flight deck equipped cutter, probably familiar with that, trying to launch recover helicopters. The pitch and roll limitations are pretty strict. So they were way out at that point. So they're en route, and as far as we know, we're the only game in town for the most part. So we begin our trek to the hangar. Now, we're staying in the barracks at the Loran Sea Station. The hangar's a mile away. Just to give you a quick idea of what St. Paul looks like in the winter, that's the front door of the barracks. And St. Paul is a big rock in the middle of the Bering Sea, and there's not a single tree on the island. So when the wind picks up, it blows the snow across the island and drifts the island up. That handsome fellow there is about 6'4", and that's the road actually drifted out that they cut out with a front end loader, which you'll see here. That's the front end loader that we followed to the hangar, which is right here-ish. And that's what we had to do a lot to get to the hangar. That morning was no different, except the front end loader didn't show up. So we got the maintenance crew in the first vehicle, my crew in the second, and headed through. Had to do some Dukes of Hazzard, jump into some snowbanks, and got to the hangar. We put max fuel on the plane. 200 miles offshore is pretty substantial, so max fuel is going to give us a little over 6 hours of flight time. And also took on a mass casualty raft. Now, you get launched on these SAR cases, and generally speaking, it's the worst possible case, when you get the initial report. All hell's breaking loose. And when you get on scene, they're not actually flooding, their refrigerator defrosted in the galley, and they have a little bit of seepage is basically it. So that happens. You don't expect that, you don't rule it out, so you plan for both. So we really, at this point, we're still kind of unsure what the severity was. So we put an extra mass casualty raft on as well, which is a raft that is capable of holding up to 20 people. So get airborne at 0350 that morning. Now, the snow you saw was ground level, basically just being blown by the wind. As we climbed up through that, clear skies, starry night, so we can see for a million miles on the goggles, and we climb up to 6,000 feet. The reason being, the cutter's on its way, and they're already 100 miles south of us. We're using VHF, UHF communications with the cutter, which is line of sight. So the higher we get, the more curvature we can cover or get over with the radio. So we get up, and fortunately we're able to get comms with the cutter right away. Now, just to give you an idea, Steve Bond, my co-pilot, was in the flying seat, the right seat. I was in the left seat doing the navigating and talking to the radios. So we got up with the cutter, and they confirmed that the the Alaska Ranger was taken on water. They reported that there were potentially 2 people in the water at this point. They confirmed that they were unable to launch the 65 because 1, they were too far away, and 2, they were way a lot of pitch and roll limitations. They were pretty substantial sea states. The 65's maximum effective range off of the ship is about 80 miles, given their fuel restrictions and weight restrictions. So they were still about 120 miles away from the last known position, so therefore unable to launch the 65. Furthermore, they passed to us that District 17 directed that if we were to get on scene that should pick anyone up out of the water, they want us to bring survivors to Dutch Harbor. So we rogered up with all that information and then started doing some math. This distance here, straight line, is about 135 miles. And this white dot right here is a 6,000-foot volcano. So any kind of weather rolls in and you're not going over the volcano, right? Clouds and mountains don't mix so well for us. So you go around the north end and it turns into a 150-mile trip each way. Having to know from experience, flying into Dutch Harbor and trying to get fuel, you have to call the local police to go wake up the fuel guy who happens to own a fuel truck that's on the airport. He comes to the airport, thaws out the fuel pump on his truck and his motor, hopefully it starts, and we might eventually get fuel. So you're looking at a 3-hour process round trip. What we calculated was, by the time we expected to arrive on scene, the Monroe would be closer, more like 70 to 80 miles away from the last known position. Okay, I was a government major, but that's about half the distance, right? Math guys, help me out here. Okay, well, we're good? Thank you. All right, so, we're scratching our heads going, that doesn't make sense. We've got a flight deck equipped cutter. We can't land on it, but we can certainly hoist people down to it and be on scene in half the time. Plus, they've got fuel capability there. So we're thinking maybe we'll do that. And run it by the crew, all the crew agrees, and we pass on the cutter. This is what we're thinking. We'd like to bring people back to you if we can. Fully expecting the cutter to say, you've got your marching orders, press on, sailor, do what you're told. Instead, the Captain Lloyd, comes over the horn and says, Roger that 6007, we'll be standing by for whatever you need, let us know. Wow, awesome, cool cutter guys. That worked out well. Just kidding, I had to throw that one out there. So we proceeded on with that. They also passed the 1705 had launched, but they were still close to anchorage and no one was actually talking to them on the radio yet. We just got word that they were airborne en route. So everyone's on their way. C-130s, helicopters, cutters, the cavalry's en route. About 50 miles north of the Alaska Ranger's last known position, we started hearing radio chat between the Ranger and some other vessel, just kind of giving them a heads up of what was going on. Listened to it for a while, then I broke in and identified myself as Coast Guard Rescue Helicopter, let them know we're about 20 minutes out, given this tailwind. We had a really good 30-knot tailwind out of the north, which was pushing us helping us out a lot to get to scene faster. Let them know we were about 20 minutes out, confirmed their position, and asked them what their present status was. They told us they were at a 45-degree list and expected to capsize any minute. Of the 47 people on board, 7 were remaining on board. They told us they had been able to get 3 rafts off, but many people had not made it into the rafts. So I asked them, what's the division here? How many did make it into the raft, how many didn't? And they couldn't tell us. So I asked, all right, did everyone get into a Gumby suit? Everyone familiar with what a Gumby suit is? Good. Anti-exposure suits? Everyone was able to get into an anti-exposure suit. So right there, we're a leg up. There's actually a chance we can get on the scene and make a difference here because water temperature that morning was 34 degrees. So they passed that information. I asked them one more question. I honestly can't really remember what it is, and they never came back. That would be the last time we talked to them, which honestly wasn't all that unexpected given what they just passed to me. I figured they were kind of task saturated. So we started making call-outs to the vessel that had been talking to the Alaska Ranger. Their sister ship, the Alaska Warrior, answered up, pointed out that they were about 20 miles east or so, steaming towards the Alaska Ranger's position, covering about 5 knots over the ground, given the sea state, which they estimated to be around 15 to 20 feet or so at that time. We kind of coordinated with them, and I asked them if they would keep our car, which means I'm going to tell them my position every 15 minutes so that if I go in the water, they know where to start looking. Because I know once I descend down from 6,000 feet in this black hole, which is the Bering Sea of communications, I'm going to lose comms with everyone else. I'm not going to be able to talk to Cutter, ComState, Kodiak, the air station, anyone else. It's just the comm suite on the H-60J is old and antiquated and just doesn't work that well in Alaska. They agreed, passed all that information to the Cutter, and we began our descent. Now, this is where kind of the first real crew resource management issue came in for the morning. As we began our descent from 6,000 feet, we started our descent because actually the weather started rolling in. Of course, it wouldn't be a good story if the weather was good, right? So we actually started getting some clouds, so we descended. We briefed that 500 feet will be our hard net. We're not going to go any lower than that. Pass it on to the flight mech and the rest of the streamer, they roger up, and we begin our descent. Steve Bond and I are now, I'm looking at charts, trying to figure out what my closest point of land is. If we lose an engine, have to get to the beach, or where can I go for fuel? We're doing all that planning stuff. Steve and I are coordinating, and as we're coordinating, we go right through 500 feet and start going through 300 feet. 400 feet was in between there, I know that, but we did make it down to 300 feet. And at which point our rescue swimmer said, "Hey sir, you're at 300 feet and good and descending, you breathe 500 feet, climb, climb, climb." So both of us came on the controls, woke up, and brought ourselves back up to 500 feet. So, again, if the swimmer hadn't been paying attention, I might not be here talking to you today because we might have flown ourselves right into the water. Just a test, kind of got ourselves fixated on one position in the cockpit at that time. So that really woke us up in the morning. Kind of we put our game faces on at that point. When we got on scene, the Warrior was still about 15 miles east. We were picking them up on radar, but never had any sign of the Alaska Ranger. No radar return at all. At this point, we're also starting to get snow squalls coming through. Again, bad weather makes for good stories, right? Makes for awful flying, but good stories. And dodge the snow squalls, bring on all our anti-ice and de-ice equipment so that we don't start building ice on our important surfaces, and continue on. We arrived on scene at 0500, and to give you an idea, we're in the western part of this time zone in really northern latitudes. The sunrise at this time of year is about 9:30 a.m. So it's very dark when we get on scene. And as we roll up, we're kind of pushed down about 500 feet or a little less, and because of the weather. This is kind of a rudimentary depiction of what you'd see. You'd be sitting in the right seat. Right here is the radar. This is the kind of the windshield wiper of an H-60. So as we rolled up on scene, we, about 3-4 miles north, got a strobe light. I said, all right, strobe light, 12 o'clock, that must be one of the rafts. Good. So then we saw a second strobe light. Okay, that's probably the second raft. Then the third one, and we're thinking, oh, this is probably the place. And then the sea lit up. As we cleared the swells a little bit more and got closer, the strobe lights just started popping out from every direction. It's pretty much anywhere we looked, we were looking at flashing lights from us. We estimate, doing the math, post-event, there was 28 lights going off, 25 people in the water, 3 rafts. So they were everywhere. And we also estimated it covered about a mile-long swath along the ocean at that time. The first strobe light we flew over was one of the rafts, strange enough. And as we flew over it, someone popped out, waved their hand, we saw them, and then they immediately called us on the radio, Coast Guard helicopter, this is the Alaska Ranger, we're in a raft, did you see us? Yes, we saw you. How's everyone doing? How many people you got? They said 10 or 11, they're doing okay. And then we said, listen sir, we got a bunch of your shipmates in the water right now that didn't make it into rafts. We need to pick them up first. Are you going to be okay? I said, yes, yeah, we're going to be okay, Coast Guard. So I said, we just passed. Bail out as much water as you can, stay close, stay warm, and we'll be back to get you. So we did. We rolled around, and Again, no elastic range in sight, so we figured at this point that the dewatering pump that we carry on board was not going to be much use to us, and kicked it out the door to make room in the cabin. Also looking at all those strobe lights, we're thinking, how the heck are we going to fit all these people in the helicopter? Jayhawk's big, but it's not that big. It's not 47 people big, and there's a lot of people in the water. And we have no idea how many at this point. Just more than we can fit. So we kicked the pump out, and then we decided we're going to deploy the mass casualty raft that we had also. So we get no hover and start to do our thing with this raft. The way it works is it's packaged, and we attach a 105-foot polypropylene line to it, kick it out the door once it hits the water, pull the cord, it activates the cylinder, which inflates the raft. People have a floating object to get into. Well, as we kicked, strike one was we were hovering too high. None of us, we were all technically knew how to do this, but hadn't done it before, so weren't as familiar with it as we should be. We were hovering too high with strike one. Strike two was, as the raft went out the door, a knot formed in the polypropylene line, ripped the line right out of the rescue swimmer's hands before he got a chance to inflate it. So the line and the bag go out. Strike three, which is a care package we put in the water to float right by the survivors, useless, right? So this rescue swimmer calls out, sir, it didn't inflate, it ripped out of my hands. We all kind of say a couple unkind words to each other and move on. Can't do anything at that point. So the next object is, all right, we got to start getting people out of the water. We picked a light that was effectively downwind and just picked a light and started going. And that way the rest of the survivors would start blowing towards us. As we started hoisting, we elected to start out with a direct deployment, which means the rescue swimmer hooks the rescue hook to his harness, goes down in the water and never disconnects. And sea states like this, that's a very prudent method because he's always connected to the helicopter, and that way you don't run the risk of losing him. However, it generally tends to make the hoisting take a little bit longer because there's a little bit more maneuvering and working around the cable. So that first hoist, we flew up to a group of two survivors, arm in arm, splashing and waving, and put O'Brien, our swimmer, in the water, direct deployment, and that first hoist took forever. It just took for where, the sea state, every time the seas broke over the swimmer survivor, pushing about 50 feet behind the helicopter, and we'd be making these huge corrections to try and get back on top of them, to hoist them. Normal procedures are, when you're doing a direct deployment, you get right on top of the survivor and swimmer before you recover them. And that's kind of what we were trying to do. Finally, we get the first survivor in, and start putting the swimmer back out for the second survivor, and we all realize at some point that everyone else in the helicopter has been to the advanced helicopter rescue school to give up the story. And we kind of have this, unanimous light bulb come on, hey, we need to start dragging the survivor in the swimmer. Which means, instead of trying to get the helicopter right over them, we're going to just take slack on the cable, it's going to bring them underneath us, and then pull them out of the water once they're underneath us. Additionally, it tells me as the co-pilot, I need to start calling swells. These swells are about 25 feet now. And we can tell that because we have a radar altimeter that sends a beam out the bottom of the helicopter and tells us how close the next thing that's going to hit the helicopter is. So we were at a 40-foot hover, we go down about 15 feet, and that's, again, check my math mo, but I think that's about 25 feet. So I would call the swells up. Steve's flying, Rob's hoisting, O'Brien's in the water, and I would call swells about 5 seconds off the nose, 3 seconds, swells coming to the nose now. That lets Steve know he has to start backing down to anticipate the movement that the swell is going to take the swimmer and the survivor back. So the second hoist went a lot better, went a lot faster. Pick up the survivor and our swimmer, and at that point, while they're doing that, I would identify the next group of survivors. Steve, you got a group at 11 o'clock, 200 yards or so, protect it that way, and we just had the next closest group of strobe lights. The next group we came up was a group of 6, arm in arm, and as we were approaching them, our rescue swimmer O'Brien said, hey, why don't we do a harness deployment with basket recoveries? And what this means now is he's going to get in the water, disconnect from the hook. We'll bring the hook back up, connect the basket, put it back down, and we'll just keep scooping people up one at a time. And the swimmer will just put them in the basket. The obvious hazard in this is the swimmer's disconnected in 25-foot seas, and we run the risk of losing him, which turns out to be a lot of paperwork if it happens. So we don't want to do this, right? But I've flown with O'Brien several times in the past. His judgment is sound. He's an incredibly competent swimmer, and on a side note, actually has a prosthetic hip. But incredible guy, and so I trust his judgment. So we said, give him the thumbs up, all right, Obi, go get him. So we work with that plan. We put him in the water, and he starts triaging people. So now the dance becomes Steve, I'm calling swells, Steve's following the survivors and the swimmer back as the swells push him along, and Rob is putting the basket down, and he's got a real busy job ahead of him. He's got to put the basket down with enough slack so that when the trough comes, it doesn't rip the basket out of the water and hurt the swimmer and or survivor, but not too much slack in the cable so that it wraps up the swimmer and or survivor and hurts them in the trough and the crest as the waves pass through. And it turns out that O'Brien did have to kind of somersault his way out of a couple loops, a few times. Just it's darn near impossible not to let that happen. But so Rob's working really hard back there, trying to maintain good cable management. Also at this time, we're dealing with more snow squalls coming through. How many of you have grown up where it snows? Okay, driven at night with your headlights on, maybe high beams, and you get that Star Wars effect, and it blinds you out. Yeah, that's bad in a car. Worse in a helicopter. Okay, so our external lights, every time these snow squalls come through, the snow's so heavy we're losing visual reference with the water, which is really important to keep the spinny part on the top and the wheels on the bottom, which preferred method of cover. So we're being blinded out. I see this, it freaks me out, so I just turn my helmet around and close my eyes and figure everything's good until Steve yells at me to turn off the damn lights. At which point, I turn the lights off, do what I'm told, and hey, great, now we can see the water under our goggles again. The bad side of this is the flight mech can no longer see the water. Flight mechs aren't on goggles when they hoist because the cable will rip the goggles off and bam, there's $9,000 in the drink. So they can't hoist on goggles, so he can't see the swimmer and the survivor except for every 3 seconds or so when our anti-collision light goes off, it reflects off his helmet, and we get this giant conning command to get us back near the swimmer. We do this dance until the squall gets through, turn on all the lights again, and we can, get back to business and get the swimmer and survivor out. So, all this going on, a lot of cursing at Mother Nature, and we start working on what will be the fourth survivor. O'Brien's having kind of a problem with this guy. He's not combative, but he's certainly not helping O'Brien get himself in the basket. Rob recognizes this, and after about 5 minutes or so, Rob, the flight mech, waits until the survivor appears to be adequately positioned over the basket and scoops up the survivor, hoping that the weight of the man will just kind of gravity will work with us and put him in the basket. Now, also keep in mind that these Gumby suits these guys get in are all in disrepair. They've got holes, they're all leaking, they're all flooding. So these guys are all, generally 200 pounds or so, now filling with water, an extra 100 pounds of water in the boots of their suits. So it's making things really interesting for us. Well, that works. The guy falls in the basket. We get him up to the door. Rob brings him in. And he won't get out of the basket. So this leads us to our first lesson of bay that I mentioned before of assault. It won't sound as bad in a minute, I promise you. So Rob says, sir, this guy won't get out of the basket. I can't get him out. He's so cold, so frightened. He's just got, this immovable grip on the bail of the basket. I said, all right, Rob, tip the basket over. Have the other 3 survivors in there help you pull him up. So he tries that. I can hear him yelling over the engine noise, and nothing. He still won't get out. All right, punch him in the shoulder. Maybe we need to jog this guy out. We need to get him out of the basket. We need to get that basket back out the door. A little bit of shuffling back there. Sir, Rob's exasperated now. He's not getting out of the basket. You want me to just send something else out the door? I said, all right, no. Reach behind you, grab your D-cell mag light, and I want you to whack this guy. Hit him on the arm, hit him on the hand, but we need to jog this guy to consciousness so we can get him out of the basket. So begrudgingly, Rob agrees, and Steve, being the safety conscious minded one, says, just don't break his fingers. My reply was something effective, break his blankety fingers. I'll take the heat for this one. We've got people out there that are literally dying, and my swimmer's still in the water. So I want this guy out of the basket yesterday. So Rob does it, gives the guy a whack, kind of shocks him too, and then as he lets go of the bails, the other 3 survivors rip him out of the basket, and we're back in business. So, assault. Not something we teach. When you come down after flight school to the transition course in the H60 branch, it's not something I'm going to teach you, but you know, it's on-scene decision making, what you got to do in ridiculous circumstances. So, first lesson today. It only gets better from here. As this is all going on, I was talking to the raft as well, kind of getting their update. They were still doing all right, letting them know that we're still picking people up out of the water. And at this point, I mean, they're sitting in 8 inches to a foot of salt water and throw up, just in 20-foot seas and not having a good time. So they're doing well, but could be better. And also talked to the Alaska Warrior. They moved into a position about 5 miles away now. So again, getting my government math skills going, I'm thinking that's even closer than the cutter. And asked them what they looked like. They were another 200-foot Fisher processors. Thinking, well, we hoist 40-foot boats for training, and we never hoist the boats that big, you know, as a rule. So, or take that back. We're more often hoisting the much smaller boats. Bigger boats are generally easier. So I'm thinking, well, we can do this. So I run it by the crew, run it by the Warrior, and everyone agrees this is a good plan. We're going to bring our survivors to the Warrior, offload them there. It's a 2-minute transit, offload the survivors, 2 minutes back, and we're back on scene in no time. This will be good. Meanwhile, we also get a call from the C-130. They're 30 minutes out, but at least in radio comms, which means I've got a Coast Guard asset I'm talking to now, which is good. It's comforting to know that they're going to be on scene, so that if we go in the water, we'll at least have a friend watch us around, you know, instead of just a fisherman. So that was, it was still was a very comforting thing to know that they were going to be talking to us, and also coordinating with the cutter and things like that. So we get to Survivor 13, and as Rob is picking him up, he says, "Sir, I think this is it. This is going to be all we can get in." And I'm looking around, and there's still lights flashing everywhere. And I said, "Are you sure, Rob?" "Yes, sir. This one guy's light keeps slipping out the door. I'm afraid we're going to lose someone. The deck's iced over. If we want to get O'Brien back in the helicopter, this is going to be it." So, and at this point, there's a console in between the two pilots. We've got 2 survivors sitting on the center console with all the electronics. The tweets were very happy about that, by the way, when I told them later. But, I mean, they were just stacked in like Lincoln logs, and guys sitting on top of each other. And like I said, 13 200-pound guys in there, plus all filled with water. To give you a quick idea, this is the cabin of the H60. Rob the Bolt, the flight mech, O'Brien, they're handsome guys, aren't they? Rescue swimmer. Was just those 2 in back. This is a picture of a case I did about a year prior to that, where we picked 5 people up out of the water. So, to give you an idea, there's 1, 2, there's another one sitting here, 3, 4, and 5 by the door. There's our flight mech, and there's our swimmer on that case. So that's crowded with 5 people. Now we've got 13 plus our swimmer and survivor, or our swimmer and flight mech. So 15 people in the back. And it's dark, and we're afraid people are going to start to fall in. So, Rob's call, he's running the cabin back there. You know, he has the best picture. So we decided that's what we got to do. So we get the 13 survivor in, bring O'Brien back in, and we head off to the Alaska Warrior. While we were en route, I called the Warrior and asked them to get on their best course, whatever gave them the best ride. And so by the time we got there, they were on the Alaska Warrior, big boat. This thing was pitching around like a canoe when we got to it. It was unbelievable. And so we got on scene and basically made an approach to their port quarter, which is the left side of the boat, right? So, see, I remember some stuff from my cutter days. And what you've got here is this, you know, the A-frame here for getting the net in, the cranes, the smokestacks, radar, aft light mast, all sorts of stuff to grab helicopter equipment. And on the other side is very similar to this, just a very small area on the aft corner there to get the basket onto. So we make an approach, put the survivor in the basket, basket's going out the door, we're getting overhead, a lot of conning, left, right, up, down, back and forwards, and finally we get board, when we back off, board the hoist. Just looking kind of hairy. Ship's pitching about, we're trying to keep up and trying to get this basket, you know, threaded through the needle. So we regroup, this time bring the survivor back in the cabin, let him sit there, because I think he may have soiled his Gumby suit on that first approach. And we make an approach with the survivor in this time and see if we can do it. Second approach, same thing, board. Third approach, same thing. We ended up aborting. It was just too hairy. What we're looking at, best case scenario, is if we get the basket down there, we're looking at potentially hurting or injuring the guy we're trying to help. Moving on to potentially wrapping the hoist cable around something, or worst case, hitting some part of the helicopter on some part of the boat, which is also generally frowned upon. So the pressure here is immense, okay? Self-induced, because we know if we can get these people off on the Warrior, we can get back on scene fast, because it's been an hour. They've been in the water a long time, and I don't know what the coldest pool you've been in, but I haven't made it into 34-degree water yet, and that's a streak I hope to keep going. So they don't have a lot of time. And you know that if we can't make this happen, we're going to have to go to the cutter as our next option. And at that point, it becomes no longer a rescue mission, but a recovery mission, because there's going to be no one alive when we get back. So we make an approach to the bow. And as you can see, a lot more space. First thing is the superstructure, and then this mast array. You know, they've got the capstans and the chains and all that, the nautical boat things on the front, but it's overall a much more wide open area to hoist to. So we make an approach, and this thing's doing the diving board effect. And from my perspective on the left seat, it looked as though this mast was either going to scrape the paint off of Steve's door or go right up through our rotor head as we're trying to make this approach. And finally, Rob again called the board, at which point I asked, Rob, do you think you can make this hoist safe? Do you think we can make it happen? And he said, no, sir, I don't. Thus brings us to our second lesson of abandonment. The only decision now is to go back to the cutter, right? And as I discussed, we're leaving people to die. We in the Coast Guard are charged with going out and helping people, not leaving them. So, man, that's a tough decision. But it's the only decision. We have 13 people we can save. So, take that tidbit of information, compartmentalize it, put it away, and depart the area, head back out. So, second lesson, abandonment. Not something I would wish on anyone to have to make that call. So we depart the Warrior and head north. Meanwhile, while all this was going on, the 65 crew, TJ Schmitz and his crew, had been ramping up. They were getting close to the 80-mile range, and TJ's amped up. Now that they're officially in distress, they know stuff's going on. He wants to get up and get down there and help us out. We know none of this. We don't know that any of this is going on in my helicopter. So they get within range. TJ talks to the CO and brings up this passage from the Coast Guard Air Operations Manual, which says, maybe it says that?
Can't see it.
Yeah, thanks. All right. As I'm trying to get my page up here. Basically, this passage out of the 3710, our air operations manual, that says if the probability of saving a life is high, the damage of the helicopter is warranted, even if it renders the aircraft unusable for future use. And pulled that out, showed it to the captain. The captain said, okay, crazy, that's what you want to do? Let's do it. So in these 20-foot seas, TJ's crew does a follower that traverses the helicopter, gets it tied down, gets the blades unfolded, gets everyone ready, fueled, and actually gets airborne. They had briefed before they even took off, we're probably going to over-torque this thing getting off the deck, but we'll deal with that later. Amazingly enough, they kind of waited for the flight deck to come up and use a catapult effect and kind of launch themselves off the cutter. And did not over-torque, and amazing feat just getting up there. I'm nervous hovering next to these things, let alone taking off and landing from them. So it's an amazing feat what they did just to get the helicopter out of the hangar, let alone get it airborne. The rest of it's not that exciting They head down, and as they start heading south, we get comms with them, and this is the first time in which we realize someone else is going to be out there to help us out that morning, which is kind of a big relief to know that someone's going to be on scene in our off time. So we pass them all our information, and they truck on down. They basically get on scene and come to the same conclusion we do. They're going to do harness deployments. Again, it means the swimmer disconnects, and basket recoveries. So they get on scene to a group of 2, pick them up, recover their swimmer, get on scene to a group of 1, or it's not really a group, I guess it's just 1. But pick him up and the swimmer, then come up to a group of, another group of 2. So they've got 3 survivors on the helicopter, go to put the swimmer out with another group of 2. This group of 2 is either hanging onto or tangled in some fishing gear. So they approach this one a little more cautiously, but they put Abram Heller, their rescue swimmer, in the water to help these 2 guys. This survivor becomes combative with Abram. This is a situation that you may encounter out there at some point. Survivors, even though you're there to help them, they're so frightened and so in such a state of shock that they fight their rescue. They make it very difficult to get into any kind of rescue device. So this goes on for almost 10 minutes. That Abram is wrestling with this guy, this gentleman, to try and get him in the basket. Al Musgrave, their flight mech, recognizes this and comes to the same conclusion, waiting till the survivor appears to be sufficiently over the basket, scoops him up, same way we did, and goes with that. At first, it appears to work. The survivor sinks into the basket and comes up. About halfway up, he notices the survivor start to slip out of the basket. His feet were out of the basket, and as I mentioned, they're filled with water. So they start dragging him out of the basket. Al has a split-second decision now: either put him back in the water and potentially lose him, or continue with the hoist, try and get him in the cabin. So he continued with the hoist, tried to get him up, got him to the cabin door, but his feet were so filled with water, he slipped out to about his torso now, that his feet were hanging below the cabin, and Al couldn't get him in the door. Now, Al's a big guy, and if he couldn't physically manhandle this guy in the door, I don't know that there's too many of us that could. Maybe Rich, but otherwise, no one else. So, Al reaches back to the tail of 65 to grab a survival knife. He's going to try and cut the guy's boots to drain the water, make them lighter, help him get him in. As he does that, the gentleman slips down to about his elbows, just hanging on the basket. He abandons the knife, gets both arms around the guy, holds on to him, at which point the gentleman loses his grip altogether and slips from Al's grip, falls 40 feet, and lands face down. Al announces to the pilots. They backed off and established visual contact with the gentleman, who was still face down, unresponsive, not making any attempt to right himself, essentially. So they stayed there for a couple seconds to see if he was going to make any recovery, and he didn't. So at that point, Abram Heller, the rescue swimmer, had already moved on to the next survivor. So they continued on to help those that they could. So they go over, they pick up that 4th survivor, recover the swimmer, then go to a group of 4. Now here we've got 4 survivors and Abram in the helicopter, in the back of the helicopter. They can take a total of 5 people. 4 survivors and the rescue swimmer, or 5 survivors and leave the rescue swimmer and the raft in the ocean. What do you think they chose? Leave the swimmer, right? I say that, but it's really an amazing thing that what Abram did. So they discuss this with Abram. He says, just leave me a raft, please, and I'll do what you need. They put him in the water. He grabs one of the survivors, puts him in the basket. They have 5 survivors on board, and now fuel critical, so they depart scene, kick a raft out to Abram, and which fortunately inflates properly, gets in the raft, and then gets out and grabs 3 other survivors and drags them into the raft with him. Now, if you've ever done anything in a pool in the deep end where you don't have good footing, polo or just wrestling drills, any kind of, it's incredibly difficult. Now try and lift a 300-pound guy in 20-foot seas at 34 degrees, 2 feet over the edge of the raft to get him in there. I don't know how he did it, but he did. An amazing feat in and of itself. Then he would climb in, sit there for a while, get back out of the raft, swim around, see if he could find any other survivors, and get back in the raft every so often. And that went on for almost an hour until we got back on scene. Back at the cutter, we had arrived after the longest 30-minute transit of our lives, thinking that we had just abandoned all these people. The majority of the survivors were already hypothermic. 2 of them were slipping very deeply into shock. So Brian and Rob started giving sternum rubs. If anyone's ever had that done to them, it's really uncomfortable, and that's the purpose. You make them uncomfortable so they don't go to sleep and fall into an irrecoverable state of shock. So they're doing that, and we get to the boat and we begin hoisting. Now, the cutter is almost 400 feet, but it's diving through these waves really significantly too. 20-foot seas, this thing's jumping up and down. And so the hoisting evolution again becomes very tenuous. But call the swells coming up, bows coming up, okay, bows going down, at which point we knew the flight deck was going to come up. That lets Steve and Rob know, as they lower the survivor on the flight deck, they got to time it right so that they don't smack the survivor on the flight deck and potentially injure him. The cutter crew, meanwhile, was like, I don't know, some kind of NFL play. They had people on both sides of the hangar. We'd get the basket on deck. 2 people would run out, grab the person out of the basket, and run them down the side of the hangar down the galley. And we just kept this conga line going the whole time until we got everyone out of the helicopter. Now, this brings us to our 3rd lesson today of accountability. I didn't count people as they went out of the helicopter. We're not going to offload any more or less than we took on, right? We're not taking anyone for a ride. So I figured, if we took on 13, 13 will get out. Just keep offloading until there's no more red suits. I counted as they came in. O'Brien and Rob counted as we flew up to the cutter. We all counted 13. We would find out later that we only actually recovered 12. Why is this important? Because that would result in 3 to 4 more days of searching for the missing person who is still missing. So the lesson there is you can never count enough. 1, 2, 3 times is enough. You can never be too sure. Always back yourself up. Double check yourself. Around the time we were getting towards the end of the survivors, getting them out the door, I did a fuel calculation and realized if we didn't take on some gas now, we were not going to be real useful on scene. So I called the cutter and asked if we could do a HIFR, which is helicopter in flight refueling. The way this works is the cutter flight deck team fakes out a hose on the flight deck. We move in, pick it up with our hoist hook, plug it in to the cabin, and we start taking on fuel while we hover next to the ship. Again, we're too big to land on the 78. So we passed the cutter, we're going to need some fuel. Can you help us out? I said, Roger that. Once you get your last survivor off, give us 10 minutes to reconfigure, we'll be back with you. We did that. In 5 minutes, they were ready to go. We moved in and started fueling. Now, none of us on the helicopter had ever HIFR'd before, prior to a day before this SAR case. We were fortunate enough to go out for a day trainer with the Cutter Monroe and do a HIFR training. Now, it was sunny, it was flat, and I was flying, because I only fly on the controls when it's sunny. It's my personal rule. So, to be honest, it's safer for everyone that way. So, but it was a great training evolution, and probably saved our lives that morning, or the next morning, because we were all at least, we had the motions in our head for when we needed it. Now it's nighttime, 20 to 25 foot seas, we're on goggles, and Steve's in the right seat. Probably the best decision I had made all morning was putting him in the right seat. That's hindsight. And the trick with the HIFR is you want to be low enough so that these antiquated fuel pumps don't have to fight gravity to the effect of, you don't want to be burning more fuel than you're taking on at any given point. And, but you don't want to be too low such that the dip to absorb shock, okay, doesn't get caught by the waves. So, kind of big balancing act there to make that happen too. Finally, as we're in the process of taking on fuel, we get cut short by the cutter, and they pass on that. They just say stop flow, stop flow, stop flow, and then we hear TJ Schmidt's calling. He says 20 minutes from being on scene with the cutter, 36 minutes to splash, which means they have a 16-minute window before they're going to physically run out of fuel and go swim themselves. So we cut loose the fuel hose, headed back to scene, and get out of there as fast as we could. So the TJ could get back on deck, which he didn't. As we departed south, we talked to TJ, and he told us he had 5 people on board. He had his swimmer in the raft with 3 other people, and then the C-130 came in and said, well, the last warrior just called in, and they picked up around 20 plus people out of the 2 rafts. And so we're thinking, for the first time this morning, this might actually work. We do the math. We thought we had 13. 5 in TJ's helicopter is 18. 3 in the raft is 21, plus 20 out of the rafts is 41 or so, maybe more. So again, it's the first time that morning we're thinking we might actually make a real difference here this morning. And it was just kind of that re-energizing shot that we needed to get back on scene. So we get back on scene. First thing we get to is, we're on scene again at 8, still dark out. First thing we fly up to is the raft with Abram and the 3 survivors. Abram jumps out, we put our basket down, he puts all 3 survivors in the basket individually, we put all 3 survivors and Abram up, and head to the next strobe light. The next strobe light we get to is the first crew member we would get to that wasn't making any signal, wasn't trying to gesture us, wasn't moving. And when we got there, it was apparent that he was unresponsive. So again, we elected to do another direct deployment, which means O'Brien's not going to disconnect, but it's going to take a little bit longer. Get into a hover, put O'Brien in the water, he's working with the survivor. At this point, kind of look around just to see if I can find any more strobe lights, and look to my left, and I see the Alaska Warrior, who settles on a course right at us from about 500 yards away. We're at 40 feet, you saw the Alaska Warrior. 40 feet is not going to clear that boat. So, kind of do a double take, try and find my radios button, and give him a call. So the Alaska Warrior is the Coast Guard helicopter. We're right up about 500 yards. You need to turn right now. We're committed to a hoist right now. About 10 seconds goes by, and I hear, oh yeah, Coast Guard, we got you, and they peel off. We avoided becoming a hood ornament on the Alaska Warrior that morning, so that was good. We finally get the man up in the cabin, or up to the cabin, and again, suit filled with water, couldn't get him in the cabin. He's hanging so far below the cabin door, we just can't get him in. He's attached to the front of our rescue swimmer, we just can't get him in. Even with Abram, the other rescue swimmer in our cabin, and Rob, the flight mech, trying to pull, he's just too heavy and there's too much working against us. Rob suggests to O'Brien to use the survival knife to cut the man's booties, which somehow he does, being a contortionist, bends down while he's attached to the gentleman and cuts the boots to drain some of the water. But they're still having problems. So Rob asks me if I can run the hoist. Now on our flight controls up front, both pilots have hoist controls to run the cable up and down. So what that affords the flight mech the capability of using both hands to try and pull the survivor in. So you have a 5-person hoist evolution going on right now. Steve Bond's flying. Rob and Abram are pulling from the inside. O'Brien has a survivor attached to him, pulling from the outside, and I'm running the hoist at the command of the flight mech, who's running the show at this point. A little bit of work, we get everybody in, and O'Brien passes to us that the gentleman has no respiration, no circulation, and is completely unresponsive. Basically says he's non-recoverable. At this point, I make it a point to turn around and look at the gentleman so I can articulate this later. And even in the dim light of the cabin, you can see that there's no color. The man, he had ice covering his face, and was beyond recovery. So we put him in the corner of the cabin, put a blanket over him, so his crew members didn't have to see him in that state, and continued searching. As far as we knew right now, there were 3 people still missing. So we got down and checked out the rafts one more time, make sure no one was straggling on the rafts. Then we conducted 2 Victor Sierras sector searches, and by that point, our survivors were slipping. We've been told that the 65 was en route for their second sortie, so we elected to depart, get back up there, and offload the survivors while we could. This is the point at which that baked bean eating contest kicked back in, and Abram, between swallowing salt water, being hypothermic, and having a gut full of beans, started throwing up in the back of the helicopter, which means, 1, that's gross, 2, he's out of commission. So we passed that on to the 65. They asked if they could pick our swimmer up to go back out, so we coordinate a means of transferring the survivor on, or the survivor's down, the swimmer's down, and then they would take the swimmer and go back. They did that, they headed back. We began our second hyper so that we could fly the 2-hour transit home at this point. We had over 6 hours of flight time on us, and we told that 65 was going to remain on scene to do the rest of the search, and we would head home. As we did that, the C-130 called in and said that the Warrior picked up the remaining people, so we thought, and we picked O'Brien back up and headed north for the 2-hour transit. It wouldn't be until we landed at St. Paul that we found out there was a miscount in my helicopter. So that would result in 4 more days of searching with C-130s and helicopters and cutters and fishing fleet all helped, and again, the gentleman's still missing. End result, we landed in St. Paul with 8.5 hours straight on us, about a little after 11, maybe noon, and it was forgivingly sunny when we landed. Big picture, of the 47 people that went in the water that morning, 42 were recovered alive. 4 were deceased and 1 is MIA. Of the 3 of the 4 that were deceased were the first mate, the chief engineer, and the captain. They were the last 3 off the boat, and they were directly responsible for getting everyone up, because it was late, so a lot of people were sleeping, into their Gumby suits and off the boat, so that there would be something for us to work with when we got there. The survival of those 42 men are directly attributable to the actions of the top 3 command staff on this fishing boat, so I'll have my hats off to them as well. NTSB found with this ship, what happened is they dropped the rudder post, they started sinking, and on these old boats, if the controllable color lost its electrical signal, it would default to full aft, even though the engines are still turning. So when the stern sunk, flooded the generator room, lost electrical signal, propellers default to full aft, now start driving the boat that's already stern low backwards. That happened right about the time they'd gotten the rafts over the side. So put the rafts out, ship drives itself down into the sea, and the rafts go away that way, which explains why so many people are in the water that way. So those are the NTSB findings. I know it's 8 o'clock now, so I'll wrap this up. If anyone would like to, has any questions for me, or would like to stay after and ask some questions, feel free. But real quick, 3 points. 1, if you're ever going to do the opposite of what a district admiral tells you, make darn sure you can justify it later, because you will be called on the carpet. Just throw that out there. No from experience, I'm just saying. 2, you're going to go out and you're going to do SARS, I promise. You're going to get out there and you're going to train, you're going to be ready for it, because we all know everything when we graduate from here. You're going to get on scene and it is going to be nothing like what you expected. You have to get out there and you have to make it happen. So don't get caught thinking, we all do. Try not to get caught as often as I do, thinking you know everything when you get on the scene. Be ready to adapt, be ready to assess the situation as you get there. Lastly, these Gumby suits were awful. You're going to go out and you're going to be boarding officers on cutters. Part of your job as boarding officers to inspect their safety equipment, read bergs, their Gumby suits. We've all done it at some point. It's a mundane job. It's a pain in the butt, rolling the Gumby suit back out, sticking it back on the sleeve, and putting it back on. But it will save their lives, and that's what we're here to do. So it seems like a mundane task and a boring part of your job when you get out there, but it is, as you can see, critically important to the safety of these fishermen. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. So